is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Coach's Quarters. Sorry I was absent last week. We had a little bit of stuff going on in my personal life. To kick this show off, I want to send a big shout out to ESPN 97.5 for the awesome listeners party that they threw. Me and Gene were able to go out. We were able to meet some fans of the show. We were able to make some new fans of the show for our Sunday night gig at ESPN 97.5 on the Mean Gene Show. That was really cool. That was really, really cool. They had terrific. It was the best catered food I've ever had at an event of any sort. And everything was neat. They had the Astros World Series Championship trophy out. And there was a lot of producers from ESPN, got to meet and hang out with Lance Zierlein. Like it was a really cool experience, man. Big shout out to me and Gene for bringing me along and allowing me to kind of ride his coattails on this little journey. Because being a co-host of the Mean Gene Show on ESPN has been a really, really cool thing I've got going on. So hopefully y'all are tuning into the show. I have been dropping those shows with mine. So whether you're watching it live on the link that I'm putting out on my Facebook, my Instagram page, or if you're tuning in via Spotify or wherever and listening to it in podcast form, thank you for listening, and hopefully you're enjoying the content. We're having a lot of fun putting that show out. So we're gonna go ahead and jump on into the information for today. So it was a sad week for the Houston Texans here in Week 3. We are officially 2-1. We lost to the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday, and it was more than just a loss. We got the absolute piss kicked out of us. And it's a little concerning. So I'm not totally sure, in all honesty, whether I've said it on the show or whether it's been in personal conversations, but CJ Stroud has looked really shaky this season. He's looked more hesitant this season. And he all around, he kind of looks more uncomfortable in the pocket. And that was, on full display against the Minnesota Vikings. They were able to make him uncomfortable. We had no run game, so they teed off against the pass all game. CJ Stroud was our leading rushing attack. And it just, Minnesota was able to attack all of the things that have made Houston good so far. We're still down Joe Mixon. Damian Pierce was out with a hamstring injury. Cam Akers couldn't get anything going. Like I said, CJ Stroud was the leading rusher on our team outside of Cam Akers, and it's not a recipe for success. Stroud throws a pick on his opening pass of the game. He ended up finishing the game with 2 interceptions. So it's just one of those things where we were off kilter all game, and Minnesota came to play, man. Sam Darnold is playing at an MVP level so far this season. He went 17 of 28 for 181 and 4 touchdowns, which is just lights out considering how good the Texans defense has been. We couldn't put the clamps on Justin Jefferson. Aaron Jones was super, super active in the passing game. You had rookie Jalen Naylor coming out, and he looked phenomenal in place of Jordan Addison. It looks like he's finally figuring things out. But on top of that, Aaron Jones killed us in the run game. Our defense had no answer. We couldn't tee up on any one thing over another, and they took advantage of us over the top, kind of similar to what Anthony Richardson did in Week 1 for the Colts. They had a lot of big plays. Justin Jefferson was on full display. He looked fantastic. And just all around, it was a bad showing by the defense. Derek Stingley got beat a couple times. Kamar Lassiter got beat a couple of times. Our safeties no-showed a couple of times. Our pass rush, outside of the play where we almost injured Sam Darnold, our pass rush was a little quiet for a lot of the game. And it looked like maybe we might have been looking ahead to the Jaguars next week to make sure that we got the divisional dub instead of staying undefeated. But this was a pounding by the Vikings. The Vikings look like they're for real. It looks like they're going to end up being an NFC powerhouse this season, which, everybody expected after J.J. McCarthy got hurt, all of the nonsense in the offseason regarding the Minnesota Vikings. Everybody definitely thought these guys were going to be Super Bowl contenders three weeks into the season. Everybody thought Sam Darnold was going to be on the MVP level. So this is to be expected, right? This is as expected. So the Texans take a big loss here. That was really unfortunate. I do think that it's going to kind of enable them to bounce back earlier and not lose momentum. CJ Stroud in the post-game presser said that it was good to get bit in the ass early on. That way they could, get down to business and really just focus in on this season. I am really hopeful that that is what is going to happen. I do think that we just break out of the gates next week. It's kind of a trap game against a winless Jacksonville team, but you know, if there was any bounce back game of the season for Houston to just pour it on, a divisional game against the Jaguars is going to be it. So I do like Houston to beat Jacksonville in week 4, but this just pounding by the Vikings in week 3 hurt a little bit. And now for the rest of the show, I'm going to kind of bounce around the games that happened in week 3, kind of give a post-game recap. I do have a special guest coming to the show. Our in-house Miami Dolphins, resident expert is on standby. He will be joining us in studio here in a little bit to discuss what is happening with the Miami Dolphins, whether there is optimism moving forward, what are things they might be able to do to improve, things that they have looked good in despite the obvious issues surrounding the Miami Dolphins. So Joey will be on here in a little bit in studio, but before we get to that, I'm going to bounce around a little bit. I'm just going to cover some of the games that really stood out to me. You had a big Thursday night game where we got to see Aaron Rodgers flex his muscles and look the closest we've seen to primetime Aaron Rodgers since his injury. That was optimistic. It was a big step back for the New England Patriots. That's kind of a bummer, but it was nice seeing Aaron sling it like Aaron. There were a lot of questions whether or not he was even going to be able to return to form. He was hitting throws. He was moving around. Aaron Rodgers looked good this Thursday. So it is looking like the Jets are going to get better. They have that rookie running back in Braylon Allen, who is absolutely phenomenal, spelling Breece Hall, who's already a really good back. You have Mike Williams coming back off of his injury. The Chargers got rid of him. The Jets ended up picking him up. I do believe that he's going to be a big part of this offense once he's integrated completely. You have Garrett Wilson firing on all cylinders. Garrett Wilson has looked just fantastic. And then you have Alan Lazard, who has taken over as kind of the red zone threat and the security blanket for Rodgers. Rodgers got Conklin involved this week. The offensive line looked pretty good. The defense was all over the field. So it does feel like the Jets may be starting to turn it up a little bit. The Bills are surging, and I'll talk about them in a second. But with all the issues happening in Miami, with New England being in a rebuild, this was the year for the Jets to capitalize. So it does feel like everybody's kind of coming together, and it looks like the Jets might actually make a push for some sort of competency this year. Moving forward, we have the Giants and the Browns. Giants finally get a win in the win column. They were previously unwinned, right? So you get a dub in the win column over the Cleveland Browns, who there was a lot of speculation that they were going to be good this year. They looked great last year, made it to the playoffs, and it just seems that they've kind of fizzled out a little bit. The offensive line is atrocious. Deshaun Watson, albeit playing significantly better this week, has not looked great. The wide receiving core looks a little sluggish outside of Amari Cooper. Jerry Jeudy's been a lot better than I expected, which I have him in my fantasy team. He's been a pretty quality wide receiver 3 for fantasy purposes, but Cleveland can't seem to put anything together. They're really missing Nick Chubb. I think the team looks a lot better once Chubb comes back, assuming that he actually comes back full force. Jerome Ford's been good, but he doesn't have that level of explosiveness that they really need right now. That offensive line is a big part of the problem. Their defense can't do everything. That O-line is really bad. So Cleveland takes an L. The Giants finally get a 1 in the dub column. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Eagles and the New Orleans Saints. The Saints lose on that final Hail Mary to Rashad Shaheed. That was awful. They should have dink and dunked it down the field using the little bit of time they had left to try to establish some sort of move before taking a shot. They went for it all. Derek Carr gets picked off. Overall, this was a really good game. This was a full display of powerhouses in the NFC through 3 weeks of the season. The Eagles end up eking it out. Without Saquon Barkley, though, they do not look as explosive. They are really missing A.J. Brown. And thank God for Saquon in Philadelphia. He has been a godsend. Saquon is going to be a problem to reckon with all season for people playing the Eagles. The Saints did also look good. Alvin Kamara has turned back, father time. He looks fantastic. And that entire Saints offense, man, you have Chris Olave just absolutely going off. And you have all of these people in New Orleans that are playing so well. Rashid Shaheed ended up with 0 fantasy points. If anybody knew or if anybody has looked into it, or if he is on your team, you know that they did target him a piss load of times. He is a streaker. He is definitely taking the tops off of defenses. They have to respect that. Philadelphia did cover it significantly better than anybody else has so far this season. Slay seemed to have Shaheed's number all game. But overall, this was a really good game. I do think New Orleans is legit. If you listen to me at mine and Mean Gene's show on Sundays, you'll know that I did not think super highly of the Saints coming into the season. I am eating my words week in and week out. They look really, really good. So it has been that's been a cool one. That was a really fun game to watch. It was a defensive game. 15-12. The Eagles win 15-12. So it was kind of that old school. It's a lot of running. It's a lot of defense. And because Kamara had 26 carries, Saquon had 17, Jalen Hurts had 8. So it was a very in the trenches defensive battle. And if you're into that, that was a terrific game for you. I tend to actually really enjoy those games. If not, it was an incredibly boring game because it was not just slinging that rock all the way down the field. So next up on the game slate, the Broncos finally get a dub in the win column. This was probably the upset of the week. This was my upset of the week for sure. Did not see this one coming. I would have lost my ass in Vegas if I was in Vegas. This is definitely a game I would have bet on, and I would not have bet on the Broncos blowing the Buccaneers out. Do not care where this game is played. Could have been a neutral site. Could have been in Tampa. Could have been in Denver. Would not have mattered. At no point would I have ever bet any money on Denver blowing Tampa Bay out. They do. They win 26-7. They had Baker Mayfield uncomfortable all game. His receivers outside of Chris Godwin couldn't get anything going. Godwin only had 53 yards and a tutter on the day. It was just a very impressive showing by Sean Payton's defense down in Denver. And Bo Nix had a day. He didn't necessarily light up the stat sheet. He went 25 of 36 for 216 and also contributed 9 carries for 47 and a touchdown on the ground. Not necessarily just a mind-bendingly good game, but he managed the game well. He didn't lose the ball any. He was very conscious, and he managed the game the way the game needed to be managed, and they look great all game. He's still making rookie mistakes. He's still a rookie. Crazy, I know, but he is still a rookie despite being, a little older than the other rookie crop that usually come out of the NCAA. However, he has looked good. He is progressing really well, and Denver looks to be improving. It looks like they found a little bit of a run game in Beatty, how I believe you say it in Beatty. Beatty would be dope, but Beatty. And it looks like they found something. It was more of a boom. They need help at running back. Teams are able to cue in on Bo Nix throwing the ball. And as a rookie quarterback, that is almost impossible. Ask Bryce Young, the next team that I'm actually going to talk about. Carolina finally gets a dub in the win column, but it has absolutely nothing to do with Bryce Young. Bryce Young gets benched. Trade suitors all around the NFL. It's the most dramatic thing going on this season right now. Bryce Young gets benched. The Red Rifle, Andy Dalton, comes into the game, absolutely destroys the Raiders. It was awesome. I thought Carolina might win after they benched Bryce Young, literally just because it's the Andy Dalton revenge tour now. And that happened. Andy Dalton looked phenomenal. He had a 123.6 QBR. He went 26 of 37 for 319 and 3 touchdowns. Looked like the Marvin Lewis Day Bengal Andy Dalton. And everything worked. Andy Dalton played so well they had to respect the pass. So Chuba Hubbard had the best game of his career, just about. Not really, but close. It was a top 5 for Chuba Hubbard, which is great. I love Chuba coming out of college. So that one was a cool one for me. You finally saw Deontay Johnson do what everybody thought he was going to do, being brought to Carolina. Although they did target him 14 times. All of the play calling was very obviously focused around just dumping the ball into Deontay Johnson's hands. He had 14 targets, 8 catches on the 14 targets for 122 and a touchdown. Everybody else just they had 55 or less receiving yards, but Andy Dalton spread that ball around like nobody else has this season. That offense looked so good. And on the flip side, the Raiders looked terrible. Trey Tucker was the leading receiver. Jacoby Myers was right behind him. Devontae Adams had a terrible game. Gardner Minshew could not get anything going on. Aiden O'Connell looked pretty good in relief, but that was when the game was already out of hand, so it doesn't actually matter. The Raiders need a running back or a running game. I was big on Zaire White coming into this season. He saved my fantasy team last season. He has been bad. He has been very disappointingly bad, just like the QB game, despite the stat sheet showing Gardner Minshew being efficient and this, that, and the other. The Raiders have big problems at running back and quarterback on offense. Their receivers look okay. They look fine. But they have a problem at the leader of the offense and the running back, which is just right there behind him in importance, especially in a season or in a league like this one where transforms every year. Passing touchdowns are down. There's an emphasis on the run game all over the league. It is important, and the Raiders have a large deficiency there. On the flip side, the Raiders defense absolutely disappeared against Andy Dalton and the Carolina Panthers. There is no excuse for that. After the game, Antonio Pierce said some things that really sent some shockwaves through the media about how his team made business decisions in that game. So moving forward, the Raiders are going to start making business decisions. I think the Raiders are going to be active at the deadline. It's inexcusable after everything they did last season. It is inexcusable. The Raiders do not have a great OC. The offensive coordinator leaves a little bit to be desired. But there is no excuse, and I do believe there's going to be a little bit of turnover either at the deadline or at the end of the season or both, but there will be turnover with the Las Vegas Raiders. Shout out the Carolina Panthers. Shout out Dustin Pfeiffer. Joined us this previous Sunday for the Mean Gene show, for our late night show, and he works for Bally Sports in Carolina, so shout out Dustin. I know you're a big Carolina fan. This was a massive dub. So moving on, we have the Baltimore Ravens beating the Dallas Cowboys. This was an absolute blowout. This game was really bad for the first 3.5 quarters. Dallas really turned it on at the end. Dak finished with a great stat line, padding his stats. This was a pounding that the Ravens put on the Cowboys. And if you tuned into the Sunday night show, you heard me say exactly what I'm about to say, but my biggest takeaway from this game is I'm worried that the Baltimore Ravens defense has not learned anything from the past, and they collapsed in the fourth quarter just like they have done so many other times. Dallas almost comes back for the dub. Granted, Dallas still lost. Baltimore won. All is right in the world. However, this was a fourth quarter collapse of epic proportions, and you got to wonder if maybe this is something that we're going to see again. It could come back to bite a 1-2 Baltimore Ravens team in the ass in the future. Derrick Henry turned back the clock, looked like primetime Derrick Henry. He had 25 carries for 151 and 2 touchdowns. He was just an absolute monster. Lamar Jackson had a great game. He had 14 carries for 87 and a touchdown on the ground, and then went 12 of 15 for 182 and a touchdown through the air. This is exactly what we want out of Lamar Jackson. I'm worried that his body's going to take a pounding and he might not be fresh at the end of the season, but it's really fun to watch. And Lamar Jackson is probably the greatest athlete in the NFL right now. And the dude is insane. So it was fun to watch. It was a good game. The fourth quarter collapse for Baltimore it's a little worrying. And if you're a Dallas fan, you have got to be shaking in your boots right now. You break the bank for Dak, you break the bank for CeeDee. You have Micah's contract coming up next year. And it just begs to question what Dallas is going to do. Unless the salary cap goes up a lot. If you bring back Micah, you can't do anything. If you lose Micah, you have giant shoes to fill. But there are so many holes on this Dallas Cowboys team, man. They need help at running back. Zeke wasn't the answer, right? They should have kept Tony Pollard. You need help behind CeeDee Lamb at receiver. I mean, Jake Ferguson had a good day this week, but the wide receiving room for the Dallas Cowboys does not leave a great taste in your mouth. I mean, I love Brandon Cooks. He's a great receiver. He's also getting a little bit older. And Kevontae Turpin can do things, but he's not great. And it's just, I don't know. Dallas needs help at skill positions on offense, which feels weird to say out loud, but they do. And then on the other side of the ball, I mean, Dallas's run defense is suspect. Their secondary has holes. And I mean, I know they've had all these injuries the last 2 years, but at the end of the day, you can't use that as an excuse. It's next man up. So I'd be worried if I was a Dallas fan. Thank God I am not. And I am very happy that Dallas lost that game. So despite the fact the Texans lost, both Texas teams lost, and Houston's still the better Texas team. So we're on top in some regard. But we are rounding out the last of these. I've got 4 more games I'd like to bring up. We're going to talk about San Francisco versus LA. We're going to talk about Kansas City v. Atlanta, and then both of the Monday night games being the Jacksonville v. Buffalo and the Washington v. Cincinnati games. Just to line up what we've got left in store for you today, right? So, in store for you today prior to our resident Miami expert, Mr. Joey McGinnis, joining us. So jumping in, you have the 49ers versus the Rams. This was an awesome game. The Rams end up pulling off a 3-point victory, upsetting the San Francisco 49ers, who are about as depleted as an offense can get and still produce enough points to be competitive. Right, you're missing CMC. He's on the injured reserve. You're missing Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk seems to be missing in action more often than not. Thank God Jawan Jennings just showed up and showed out in this game, or San Francisco would have gotten buried. But they have injuries on both sides of the ball, and it does look like it is starting to affect their level of play. They had problems moving the ball when it mattered the most. Overall, San Francisco had a terrific game. If you look at the box score for this game, it makes no sense that San Francisco won, right? So Brock Purdy goes 22 of 30 for 292 with 3 touchdowns, no picks. Jordan Mason goes 19 attempts for 77 yards. Brock Purdy had 10 carries for 41 yards. Jawan Jennings, again, like stated before, he was targeted 12 times. He had 11 catches for 175 and 3 touchdowns. Ayuk had 10 targets, 5 catches for 48. Much less great. However, this offense was moving. The defense played pretty well. San Francisco had 25 first downs to LA's 19. They went 6 of 11 on third down to the LA's 5 of 12. They had 425 net yards to LA's 296. None of this matters, right? These are LA stats. The running back, 24 carries for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. Stafford went 16 of 25 for 221 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. Tutu Atwell had a great game, but none of the receivers behind him did anything noteworthy outside of Demarcus Robbins. Tutu Atwell had a great game, but nobody behind him had an inspiring game, right? You have Kyron Williams with the reception touchdown to hit off the hat trick, but outside of that, there's nothing noteworthy there. The 49ers had a better game, lose by 3 to the Rams. That is a great divisional win by the Rams. It breaks that division wide open. The NFC West is going to be absolutely nuts this year with Arizona being reinvigorated. The Rams were able to beat the Niners, which was big. The 49ers, who, if they can get healthy, are a juggernaut. And the Seattle Seahawks, who are undefeated and have looked really good. So you have a great division here, and this one's just going to kick off what will end up being probably a phenomenal push there at the end of the season for whoever is going to be crowned in this division. Next up, we have Kansas City and Atlanta, the late night game for Sunday. Kansas City wins 22-17. This was a sloppy officiating game on both sides of the ball. I don't care which one you're more angry at. There was the big pass interference at the end that the Falcons would have benefited from. And, possibly they could have scored in one and this, that, and the other. And then, all game, both sides were getting just beat up by the refs. I do lean towards the Kansas City getting some sort of an unfair bias by the refs just because, maybe the refs don't want to be the ones that tarnish their run at this dynasty or, whether they're supposed to be protecting them, which I strongly, strongly doubt. It's not something even worth talking about. However, this was a sloppy officiating game. The refs are just, they're doing the most here lately. And it's a little frustrating, but it's a good game. Kansas City's run game looks okay. They're missing Pacheco. Their run game's not going to be great until Pacheco comes back. Luckily, they re-signed Kareem Hunt. Hopefully, Kareem Hunt can go back to KC Kareem Hunt form for them. That would suck for the rest of us because none of us want another Patriots dynasty, but it'd be great for the Chiefs. Kareem was really, really good for them prior to his legal troubles that ended up having him sent to the Cleveland Browns. But they do re-sign Kareem Hunt, so it looks like they can keep that going. Rashee Rice is unstoppable. That guy looks absolutely superhuman this season. Patrick Mahomes is untouchable. Patrick Mahomes played a sloppy game, throwing a lot of balls into the dirt. A lot of his balls were off. They still eke out with the victory, but Pat looked a little uncomfortable against the Falcons, and it begs to wonder whether if these two teams rematch, I think Atlanta might be able to take it. I really don't know if Kansas City's got the firepower to beat them. It looked like the Falcons should have taken that one. They didn't, but it looked like they probably could have, should a couple of other things gone right for them. Atlanta's run game never got going. Algier had 7 carries for 32 and was the team leader. Bijan had 16 carries for 31. He scored a touchdown, but he was incredibly inefficient. Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, despite not lighting up the scoreboard, does seem to be progressing every week in his coming off of a torn Achilles. He went 20 and 29 for 230, a touchdown and a pick. Again, nothing perfect, but he is getting better each week. He is going to be just an X factor for this Falcons team by like week 6, week 7. I bet he's firing on all cylinders. You had Drake London and Darnell Mooney really look good in this one. Kyle Pitts was targeted a couple times, finally had 59 yards. They're getting Kyle Pitts more involved in this offense. That is great. Drake London scoring touchdowns. If you have him on fantasy, if you invested like I did, I over-invested. But if you have him on fantasy like I did, this has been great getting back-to-back weeks with touchdowns out of Drake London. Shout out to Darnell Mooney, who had 8 targets and 8 catches for 66 yards. I liked him in Chicago, and it is cool that they seem to be getting him involved in this offense as well. But Atlanta does lose. Atlanta's now 1-2 on the season. If you listen to mine and Gene's show, I was very obviously wrong about what direction the NFC South was going to take. And that is going to be probably the most exciting division in football to watch play out this season to me. Just because I had no idea who was going to be good, who was going to be bad. Now the Panthers have the same record as the Falcons. So anything could happen. It's any given Sunday in the NFL. And this Sunday it was any given Sunday. Right. So last two. We have Jacksonville v. Buffalo, which was, in theory, the first game on the Monday night slate. This game ended technically how I expected, but also absolutely nothing like I expected. I did not think Jacksonville was going to win this game. I did not think Buffalo was going to beat the dog mess out of them. Jacksonville never stood a chance. They got down real early. Something is wrong in Jacksonville. Doug Peterson came out right after the game, said he will not commit to Trevor Lawrence being the starter next week. He has looked bad. And it's a weird year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're 0-3. I did not expect them to be in the cellar in the AFC South. And they've been very inconsistent. It doesn't make any sense either. They had no run game against the Bills. ETN had 11 carries for 68 yards. He looked good, but they had to move away from the run game so quickly that it didn't matter. Tank Bigsby wasn't important. He wasn't relevant in the run game this week. Again, Trevor Lawrence was bad. He went 21-38 for 178, a touchdown and a pick. He was supplanted by Mac Jones at the end of the game. Christian Kirk finally got on the scoreboard. He's been pretty absent. If you're a fantasy owner of Christian Kirk, you've been scratching your head and wondering what in the F is going on with him. But outside of that, there were no positives. Brian Thomas got shut down. He finally looked like a rookie in this one. Gabe Davis dropped some passes. There were some throws that went over his head. And they never got anything going. The Bills were over-prepared for this, and they looked like it. Josh Allen might be your MVP this season. He looks phenomenal. James Cook is a menace. And this whole Bills offense and defense are working like a well-oiled machine, which I did not see coming. They lost their whole team. They lose Stephon Diggs, which honestly I thought was going to make Josh Allen a little better because he didn't have to focus on any one player. But on the defense, right, you lose both your starting free safeties. Matt Milano's out for the season again. And there's just been so much turnover. There were corners that left. You have other linebackers. The D-line's a little different. The Bills are a new team from last year. They have like 10 new starters over last season at the minimum. And Buffalo is just looking like the king of the AFC right now. We'll see when they play the Chiefs. That's definitely going to be the litmus test for them. But I like Buffalo to be one of the leaders in the AFC this season after the first 3 games. They've been unstoppable. And their 3-0 record, it helps show it. So, yeah, good for the Buffalo Bills, right? They look great. I've got a Buffalo Bills shirt in my closet. My girlfriend loves the Chiefs. It's great for the rivalry when Buffalo is doing well. So, yeah, that's great. Last game up prior to our resident expert for the Miami Dolphins joining us. Woo! It's going to be Washington versus Cincinnati. If you had in your bingo book that Joe Burrow is going to lose a 3rd straight game despite having a great game this week, you are doing pretty well in Vegas right now. I thought Cincinnati was going to win this game. I was definitely wrong about that. I was right about taking Jaden Daniels on fantasy. That guy's getting better every week. We finally saw Scary Terry McLaurin, get a touchdown and break 100 receiving yards, which is very, 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 it fills me with optimism. I have him in 2 of my 3 fantasy leagues this season. He has not done much. If Jaden Daniels can learn to lean on Terry McLaurin, who has been a just lights out wide receiver. I don't know how else to explain it. He's been just a beacon of hope in a sea of bad for all of these quarterbacks that have, gone through the revolving door of the Washington Redskins, now Washington Commanders. So if Jaden Daniels can learn to lean on him, this offense might just blow the tops off of people. I think as far as it goes right now, the Eagles are the best team in the division, but Washington is definitely 1B. The run game looked good with Austin Eckler and Jaden Daniels spearheading it. Brian Robinson was right behind him. He is very obviously the primary running back. Austin Eckler is just a change of pace back like he was in San Diego. However, he had a more efficient day, and they didn't need the run game to be popping off to win this because Jaden Daniels was lighting it up all over the field. Terry McLaurin led the league, or not led the league. Terry McLaurin led the team. Luke McCaffrey got work. Zach Ertz had 5. He hit 5 catches on 5 targets. Looks like Zach Ertz is back. Noah Brown, shouted him out on Gene's show. Noah Brown is getting involved in this offense. And Washington could be building a good team out there, which is really cool. However, I think we're going to have to stop calling it an upset when the Cincinnati Bengals lose. Cincinnati has not looked great. Zach Moss has been disappointing at running back. Joe Burrow, despite having a great game this game, has been disappointing up to this point. And despite the fact that Jamar Chase finally got it cooking this week, the receiving core for the Cincinnati Bengals leaves a little bit to be desired. So you wonder if losing Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon is really going to bring Joe Burrow down more than the organization thought, which is a crazy idea. But through 3 games this season, and albeit Cincinnati starts slow every year with Joe Burrow under helm, for whatever reason, they suck to start the season, they kick it off, and then they're, a juggernaut. But they don't look good right now. And it begs to question whether or not losing Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd is going to have ramifications that were unseen on this team this year. So, yeah, the Commanders win 38-33. It was a good win to put them at 2-1 on the season, leaving Cincinnati 0-3. Moving forward, we have our, and drum roll, please. Yeah. Coming up next and last to send us off into the sunset for this week's episode is our terrific insider. He is our resident expert on all things Miami Dolphins. He is the only super fan I have ever met in real life. His life is misery right now, and it is a bit of a joke to me. However, I do feel bad for him. Please put your hands together for Mr. Joey McGinnis.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to be here. Not excited for what we're about to talk about, but all the same.
I'm so excited. This has been the best part of the season. It hasn't, but it's been the best part of the season watching your team fall apart since you live in my house and you're going to have to deal with it. And it's been nothing but bad for the Texans the last decade and a half. So, but we wanted you on today because we wanted to get a little bit of an insider's look into what it's like to be a Dolphins fan right now. Everybody sees what the media is talking about online and this, that, and the other. But from somebody who focuses solely on the Dolphins, just wanted to see into the lens of your world how you may be feeling about it. So just the elephant in the room, I'm going to ask you about Tua. So with Tua's injury being another concussion, how do you feel about the rest of the season? Do you feel Tua is going to come back? Do you think that this is going to end up dooming the team? How do you feel about what is going on with Tua's injury?
I don't know if Tua is going to come back soon. I do think he's going to come back at some point. The fact that it's a concussion it's very interesting because this past offseason he lost weight so he could be more of a mobile quarterback. Of course, 3 games into the season, he gets a concussion on a scramble. It's not a good time to be a Dolphins fan. Skylar Thompson's not it. Tim Boyle, he's not it. We'll have to see what happens with Tyler Huntley. He's probably the best of our terrible options at this point. So
you brought up Skylar Thompson, you brought up Tim Boyle. So they were both rolled out in place of Tua this past week where they lost 24-3 to the Seattle Seahawks. Skylar Thompson looked awful. We watched that game together until I left for the ESPN gig Sunday. Skylar Thompson looked like arguably the worst backup quarterback in the league. So 2 questions to play off of that. 1, do you think Tim Boyle deserves the start going into week 4? And 2, What are your feelings on what seems to be Miami's negligence towards finding a backup quarterback? Because rolling out Skylar Thompson as the clear-cut QB2 was a disaster. He doesn't look like he's developed at all. So what is your take on that?
So to answer your first question, no, Tim Boyle doesn't deserve to be the Dolphins' starting quarterback. He was signed to our practice squad just a few weeks ago. He's a career nobody. The fact that Skylar Thompson has been our backup quarterback for the last 3 years, and we got a glimpse of him his rookie year, he has progressed absolutely none. He looked just as bad this past week as he did 3 years ago in the playoffs in Week 17. He's terrible. He doesn't go through his reads. He doesn't look like an NFL quarterback. So I'm excited for Hundley. He's going to bring a little something different. If Hundley's ready, if he knows the playbook, then he should definitely get the start. Tim Boyle looked much more prepared to be the NFL quarterback that he was supposed to be on Sunday. He looked a little more poised in the pocket. He actually threw the ball downfield a little bit. He didn't hit any of them, but he definitely looked a lot better than Skylar Thompson did. I don't think Skylar Thompson should have a job after this season. That's how bad he's looked.
Interesting. Yeah, no, he has been just awful. I love that you keep bringing up Tyler Huntley. I know I like Tyler Huntley. I was a big fan of his in Baltimore. So say just crazy card out of a hat, he does know the playbook well enough to go next week. Do you actually think that he will give the Dolphins a better chance to win? Or do you think that this will be kind of a Band-Aid on the season where it'll keep you more competitive, but the season might already be lost?
As a Dolphins fan, the season's lost. It's a wasted season. 2 is gone. Our offense is miserable. We're the only team that hasn't led for a single second. We got our first dub off a last-second field goal, no time left on the clock. Our offense has been absolutely non-existent even with Tua. He showed a few glimpses that first game in the second half where we kind of came alive. He threw the ball downfield, hit Tyreek on that one long catch and run. A-Chain has been nothing like he was last year. Last year, he led the league in yards per attempt and actually set a record. This year, he's at 3.5. That's terrible. Mostert's been hurt. We have no running game. We have no passing game. Our defense has looked okay considering the offense has done absolutely nothing, has sustained no drives. The defense is doing what they can. We've given up a few plays, but when you're on the field for, 3/4 of the game, it's going to happen. Ramsey has looked great in, he's given up a few passing plays, but that's going to happen to your top cornerback. He's going up against the number one guy on the other team. He's looked great in run defense. He's come down and made some big stops at the line of scrimmage. It's just a bad time to be a Dolphins fan. Considering last year our offense was lightning every game, and this year what we've seen from them is it looks like they just sat around on their couch eating potato chips all off season. So I don't think any quarterback we bring in at this point is going to solve any of these issues unless it's Peyton Manning.
The outlook does look pretty bleak, but I will give you, let me paint a picture for you, because there is, in my mind, there is one situation that salvages the Dolphins' year here, and that is Tyler Huntley comes in, and if you look back to week 1, when Aaron Rodgers was plucked from the Jets game, and they placed Tyrod Taylor in, you saw what was a dormant Jets offense just absolutely ignite under Tyrod. I know it was a very small sample size. He probably couldn't come in as a starter and do that every week. But we did see Tyrod Taylor get what looked like the whole offense engaged after a dead game. And they looked like they had so much juice. So in my mind, Tyler Huntley comes into a similar situation with the Dolphins, where there's all this talent around him in a way that he's not necessarily used to. Even in Baltimore, he was looked at as more of a running quarterback, and the wide receivers are still lacking there. So Tyler Huntley could come into this situation, give the Dolphins offense some sort of spark. There's so much talent on this offense, from Jalen Waddle to, Tyreek Hill. You have all the running backs, which Raheem Mostert should come back here soon-ish, I would hope, rather sooner than later. Do you believe in your heart of hearts that somewhere is the possibility that Tyler Huntley is going to be able to keep you afloat in what looks to be like a down division this year, with the New England Patriots being in a rebuild and the New York Jets being a big question mark with a quarterback coming off of a major injury and an offense that's just kind of starting to knock the rust off as they start to develop chemistry. Do you think it would be possible for Tyler Huntley to come in and make a difference like that?
I think it's possible. Like you mentioned, we have the playmakers. A lot of people, for most of Tua's career, have said, oh, any quarterback could thrive in that offense. They've got all these weapons that make the quarterback look good. I think these last couple weeks have proven Tua's not just a system quarterback. Tua is the system. He makes, he's got great playmakers, but he gets the ball to them. He's done great progressing throughout his career. He's the first game and a half before he died on the field, basically. You saw him going through his reads, hitting second, third reads, throwing the ball to people that weren't, it's not just the drop back and throw like he was doing his first couple years. If we had Tyrod Taylor, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. Tyrod's had a lot more experience as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Hundley had, like a season, 2 seasons where he played. He made a Pro Bowl, but that's because he was a fifth alternate.
Yeah.
So I don't give that a lot of weight. I hope that he can come in and provide some kind of spark. We haven't had a quarterback that was dual threat in a long time. But again, we haven't seen Tyler Huntley actually be an NFL quarterback in a couple years to this point. So,
just to bank off of something you said, people did call Tua a system quarterback. And if anybody watched the Seattle game versus the Dolphins, you know that he is absolutely not a system quarterback. And if he is a system quarterback, the Dolphins have a lot of quarterbacks that are not system quarterbacks. Because like we said previously, Skylar Thompson looked awful. If that's a system that is just easy for quarterbacks to play, and like you said, that guy should not have a job, because even though his stats don't look abysmal, like it looks like he was a backup that got thrust into a starter's position, he looked terrible. He looked nervous. He couldn't keep the ball in his hands. He made nothing but poor decisions. All of the yards that he has passing were yak yards, courtesy of the supporting cast that we had talked about. So there was no question in that. It was just kind of banking off of it because it's ridiculous. Now it would be ridiculous for people to call Tua a system quarterback, because if that were the case, this is an awful system, which just makes Tua look even better. So
it may be an awful system. After the first couple weeks, what we've seen, this system could be done. Defenses could have figured it out, or maybe we just regressed that much. One thing I want to point out, our short yardage situations. Last year, Mike McDaniel was getting a lot of flack because he was trying to be all fancy on third and short. On fourth down, when he's going for it on fourth down, he'd always run some kind of fancy little pass play or get the ball to the outside. And this year, he's done a lot of fullback dives. We got Alec Ingold, one of the top paid fullbacks in the league. You might as well use him. But last game, we saw all you're going to do is a fullback dive every single short yardage situation. The Seahawks figured it out, and they stuffed it. I think we were 1 for 12 on third down or something. It was not even a threat. So while McDaniel does need to chill out on the creativity on short yardage situations a little bit, you can't just do the same thing over and over. And I've been a big McDaniel supporter from day one. I love his energy. I love his positivity. But he doesn't seem to be progressing in any way. Last year, I think Tua and Tyreek really made him look a lot better than what he might actually be.
So interesting that you bring that up. If the team flounders this season away, if there's no way to replace Tua, if he never makes it back this year to salvage whatever's left of the season, do you think Mike McDaniel's going to see that stadium pulse show up over his head and start shaking his life around a little bit? Do you think he's going to end up on the hot seat after this year? Do you think that, the injury to Tua, all the injuries that the defensive players were coming back from at the beginning of the year, all of the just nonsense surrounding the Dolphins since like week 8, give or take, of last season, do you think that that's going to buy Mike McDaniel another year? Or do you think the hot seat's going to start heating up and the Dolphins might start maybe not actually pulling the trigger on replacing him, but looking towards the future at what the next step would be?
So at this point in the season, the way the season's looking, we might have a top 10 pick. We just signed McDaniel to a contract extension right before the season started. I don't think he's getting fired regardless of the outcome of this season. I would, however, be excited to see what we did with a top 10 pick. If he does come back and just doesn't look the same, if he looks as bad as he looked at the beginning of the season, I would be all in on us drafting a quarterback. I know we just signed Tua to a big extension. We got all our playmakers locked up. We don't have time to give Tua another year if he's not going to be the answer. We got to get a new guy in there right now before Tyreek gets too old, before we start losing our playmakers. A-Chain's going to come up for contract in a couple years, and we'll have to see what happens because we got a couple defenders that are going to need money. You mentioned all the injuries that happened at the end of last season. We still don't have Bradley Chubb. Calais Campbell has come in and filled in great. He's got 2 sacks the first 2 games. He's made some plays along the line of scrimmage, stopping the run, but getting Bradley Chubb back. Jalen Phillips has come out and he's looked good, which is crazy considering he tore his Achilles like 8-9 months ago. So once we get the players back from injury, we'll have to see. The defense has not been the issue thus far. So our offense was supposed to be the healthy side of the ball, and they have been the unhealthy bad side of the ball up to this point.
You mentioned you wouldn't be upset if y'all went after a quarterback should you have a top 10 draft pick. There is a big name quarterback that has recently lost his job in the NFL. He is unproven. He had all of the talent and the skill set to succeed in college, came from the same alma mater as Tua, and is what is essentially built similarly to Tua in the scope of how he plays his game. How would you react if the Miami Dolphins were to trade for Bryce Young? And do you think that that would be a good stopgap move? If you could move a 3rd or a 4th round pick for Bryce Young, do you think that that would possibly give the Dolphins the competitive edge they may need this season? Or do you believe that would be a waste of a pick?
I would be in favor of a 4th round pick. I wouldn't do a 3rd round. Everyone thought, poor Bryce Young, he's on this terrible team that's managed terribly, owners terrible, the playmakers are terrible, and then Andy Dalton comes in and just shuts all that up. I feel awful for him. He could still be a great NFL quarterback. He got thrown in there from day one. He never really had a veteran to learn behind. I wouldn't hate the move. We do have playmakers that he didn't have in Carolina, so it'd be interesting. I don't think he's a long-term solution. I would much rather us go after somebody either in free agency. I'm not sure who's a free agent next year, but I think the draft is going to be our best option. Tua could come back and look great, and I would love it if that happened because if we have a top pick, if he comes back, wins us a couple games at the end of the year, we still have a top 12 pick. We've got so many positions we could use that on besides quarterback. But quarterback is the number one position on a football team, and Miami fans have felt for years we're a quarterback away, and we finally got a guy that could possibly be the guy, and now we're starting to realize he might not be the guy.
Might not. All right. Well, final question. Should your pick not be a top 10 pick next season? Playing devil's advocate here. And we're only 3 games into the season, so it doesn't even matter what your answer is, but way too early projection. What would be your ideal first round pick if you were picked number 11 through 32 and you were not going to get a quarterback? What do you believe the Dolphins should target?
Offensive line. Dolphins, that's another thing us fans have been saying for years. Our offensive line has been terrible. You could put a lot of quarterbacks back there and they're just not getting the protection they need. I've seen some stats come up that Miami's allowed, 6th overall best pass protection up to this point in the season. But if you watch the game, Skylar Thompson was getting pounded. He's hurt for a reason. He wasn't like Tua. He was scrambling 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. He was getting pounded every time he dropped back. Tua negated a lot of that with his quick release. He was getting the ball out in record speed last year. From snap to throw, it was faster than almost anybody ever. And that negates a lot of the terrible offensive line play. But when you got 3rd string, 4th string guys that have been bouncing around on practice squads, you got to be able to protect them. If Tua is your franchise guy, you got to protect him too. I know he got hurt scrambling, but he gets beat up every time he drops back also. So offensive line is the number one priority in the draft, I'd say.
Just to bank off the offensive line statement, y'all saw 2 guards walk away in free agency last season. Do you think that it would be more of a priority to replace a Teron Armstead, where you have just somebody who can't stay healthy, get somebody who can back him up and shuffle into the rotation every time that happens, someone that can flip to right tackle as well? Or do you think interior O-line as your guards? What do you believe would be the highest priority if you didn't have that top 10 pick for quarterback? Do you think interior O-line or exterior O-line would be a larger priority?
Tyron Armstead is one of the biggest free agency signing disappointments in the last decade for Dolphins fans. He was, supposed to be one of the top tackles in the league, but everyone knew he had an injury history, and we were just hoping he could turn that around, but he hasn't. I don't even know if he's played a full game since he came to Miami. He'll get hurt and be out a couple plays, come back in, and then he's right back on the sideline. I don't know if we lost both guards. I think we lost a guard and a center. Our center was playing really good, had a bad knee injury at the end of the year, and I know a lot of Dolphins fans wanted him back. He played really well for us, but I believe he went to Seattle or something.
He retired, didn't he? He retired and then came out of retirement and went to Seattle?
So he was waiting until because he was considering retirement.
Because of his injury, yeah.
But he was waiting until he got healthy to sign with somebody, and I guess I think Miami tried to make a push for him, I saw, but I think there was some kind of disconnect between him and the Dolphins at that point. Didn't entirely agree with the way they handled the situation. But back to your question, tackle is one of the most important positions on the line. Center's important, guard's important, but having a good tackle, protecting those speed rushers coming off the end, there's a lot of good young speed rushers in the NFL now. You got to be able to keep your quarterback off the ground and keep those speed rushers away from them. So, I wouldn't care. If we drafted, it wouldn't matter what offensive line position they were. If we picked an offensive lineman with the first pick, I'd be so happy. But I'd prefer a tackle, obviously.
Awesome. All right. Well, there you have it, everybody. That's going to conclude our show today. Just give a big round of applause for our resident Miami expert. And we're going to shut this one down for you tonight. Please tune in to ESPN 97.5 this Sunday night. Me and Gene are live every Sunday from the ESPN studios in Houston. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of The Coach's Quarters. I am your host, Jacob Meadows, and I will see you guys next week. Peace.